proud thanksgiving, a mother for her children. England mourns for her dead across the sea. Flesh of her flesh they were, spirit of her spirit, fallen in the cause of the free. Solemn the drums thrill, death, august and royal, sing sorrows up into immortal spheres. There is music in the midst of desolation, and a glory that shines upon our tears. They went with songs to the battle. They were young, straight of limb, true of eye, steady and aglow. They were staunch to the end against odds uncounted. They fell with their faces to the foe. They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. They mingle not with their laughing comrades again. They sit no more at familiar tables of home. They have no lot in our labour of the daytime. They sleep beyond England's foam. But where our desires are and our hopes profound, felt as a wellspring that is hidden from sight, to the innermost heart of their own land they are known, as the stars are known to the night, as the stars that shall be bright when we are dust, moving in marches upon the heavenly plain, as the stars that are starry in the time of our darkness, to the end, they remain.
Good morning everyone, and welcome to our Remembrance Liturgy and Assembly this morning. And I know again this year it's virtual, we can't help that with the current climate, but the message is still an important one that we are going to go through this morning. And I know, because you guys always are, we will show respect for the people that have fallen in wars previously, and at 11 o'clock later on we will show that and mark that with a minute silence and the last post. When I was planning what we were going to look at today, what the theme and the focus was going to be, it's very easy to fall into the trap of doing the same things that you've done before. So I've settled on a title about what does a hero look like. And I want to talk today about a couple of stories of people that, one perhaps known more in modern times as a hero, justifiably, but also a lot of other men who are lying in unmarked graves, never ever visited by their family because their family don't know where they are, and almost forgotten to history. And there's a national scandal I'm going to show you later on of how the British relied on Imperial, Commonwealth, Empire troops and barely acknowledged what they did for us. And I want to start with a quote from a very famous man, from John F. Kennedy, who made this as part of his inauguration speech when he became president back in the 60s. And he said this: "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." And I think patriotism we understand because people have that sort of innate feeling of belonging. But yet I'm going to show you some stories today of people that didn't belong to the UK, yet paid the ultimate sacrifice, gave their life for our freedom, even though it wasn't really their battle, wasn't really their fight. And I want to talk about how those people were treated. So before we get into some of that, let's actually have a look at some of the numbers behind this, okay? We're going to focus on World War I and World War II, but this was the story pretty much in every conflict the British Army has fought in the 20th and the 21st century. In World War I, there was about 3 million soldiers, labourers, miners, these sort of people that came from all across the Empire and Commonwealth, India, Australia, South Africa, etc., and served alongside British troops on the Western Front. Didn't have to, wasn't their fight. They felt akin to us, they felt that it was their battle, they wanted to get involved. And you could argue, couldn't you, that the outcome of either or both wars might have been different if we didn't have those reinforcements from elsewhere. In World War II, millions of men joined up for military service. India gave nearly 1.5 million men, over 600,000 from the Canadians, 400,000 from Australia, and so on. These are millions of men that realised that they were fighting for freedom and that therefore they would come and join us in that fight. And I want to focus on one man in particular. And I doubt you've never heard of him. His name was Darwan Singh Neji, and he is there, you can see him on the stretcher being carried in to a British military hospital. And the reason I want to tell his story, or I'm going to get his son in a minute to tell you his story, is because he is one of millions of men that we almost ignored, that whose story was barely told, that if you stopped somebody in the street and talked about war, wouldn't probably give it a second thought that these men from halfway around the world came and fought for us and with us and stood alongside us. He was the first Indian soldier, the second one to actually get the Victoria Cross, but the first one ever to have it actually presented by His Majesty the King. This is our highest, most prestigious award for gallantry when the enemy is attacking, and his son in a moment will explain to you what he did to get that. It is the highest award any of us in this country can get, yet a man from India got it. That speaks volumes for the character of the man, for the passion, for the belief in what is right, and yet, as you'll see later on, we tried our best to airbrush these men out of history. He was approximately 33 years old, got to the level, our equivalent of a corporal in the Garhwal Rifles, and fought with distinction alongside British soldiers. I'm going to let his son, who was also a member of the Indian Army, to take up his story and explain this extraordinary man who happened to be his father.
You know, those days it was a trench warfare. War was face to face. There was a trench which was occupied by Germans. My father was the section commander at that time, that is a Naik. On the night of 23rd, 24th November 1914, he led the attack and injured about 7 to 8 or killed about 7 to 8 Germans. He was severely injured on his head, on his arm, and he was profusely bleeding. But he said that so long the trench is not fully captured, I will not leave the position. And he was awarded the Victoria Cross by King George V. Here it is written, for valor, for valor. Till First World War, people have no much idea about as to what is the gravity of the war. He was so much affected by the devastation of the war. Possibly losing his friends right in front of him. It is not a good thing to kill another person. Possibly he himself benefited so many people because for someone else's sake, and he never wanted war things to be repeated. He had 2-3 guns. He never went for hunting. He said that killing killing a bird is, one should not kill anything. He realized that you can survive so long the God's hand is on you. He was absolutely illiterate when he joined the army. He used to say that we are far, far behind than what those people are. So backward, where people in our area even didn't see a vehicle. His outlook changed. He saw the world. In fact, the life of the people of our area was just like a frog in the well. But after visiting all over Europe and fighting in the war and seeing how the world is progressing, his outlook changed. And his basic change was that there should be more education, one should live well. King George himself definitely asked him that, what do you want? He said that in my area there is no school. Our children are absolutely illiterate. So in case a educational institution could be established in a place like Karanprayag, and sure enough, within a year or so, a middle school was established at Karanprayag. That is a very wrong impression some people have got, that Indian troops who fought in the First World War and Second World War, they fought for a different country. I entirely do not agree with it. They fought for the Indian nation that time.
So these men fighting for India and the British Army gave the ultimate sacrifice just like millions of other people did. And yet the treatment of them, which I want to talk about a little bit now, is nothing short of scandalous. So there's been an investigation quite recently, and I want to show you in a second some footage of the Secretary of State for Defence actually sort of apologising for this, that at least 116,000, but more likely 350,000, mostly African, Middle Eastern and some Indian First World War casualties may not even be commemorated by name on any wall, have a gravestone, or in that matter, even be written in a book somewhere. The fact that they went over the top like every other man, the terror, the intense stress and the pressure of the moment that everybody faced, and that these people were not given the same dignity afforded to others. They also thought that round about 50,000, give or take a bit, of African and Asian casualties have been commemorated unequally. The investigation found that there is pervasive racism which had underpinned back in the 20s this idea that why should we commemorate such people? Why do they deserve it? In fact, there was one quote from a governor who was in charge of an area of India at the time, and he said, and I quote, "The average native," which is a horrible word, but the average native would not understand or appreciate a headstone. Now just let that sink in for a second. These are men that have travelled halfway around the world to fight for freedom. They have paid the ultimate price. They have given the ultimate sacrifice. And yet, men at the time thought it was pointless, stupid, useless to give them the dignity of a headstone. They wouldn't understand it. how insulting that is. Thankfully, this 100 years ago, but still, it's taken the British government a long time to acknowledge that this has been a problem.
The report concludes that post-World War I, in parts of Africa, the Middle East and India, the Commission often compromised its principles and failed to commemorate the war dead equally. Unlike their European counterparts, the graves of up to 54,000, mostly Indian, East African, West African, Egyptian and Somali casualties were not marked by individual headstones. Some were remembered through inscriptions on memorials. The names of others were only recorded in registers rather than memorials in stone. And a further 116,000 personnel, mostly East African and Egyptian, were not named or possibly not commemorated at all. There can be no doubt prejudice played a part in some of the Commission's decisions. In some cases, the IWGC assumed that communities of forgotten personnel would not recognise or value individual forms of commemoration. In other cases, they were simply not provided with the names or burial locations. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission and the government both of the time and today, I want to apologise for the failures to live up to their founding principles all those years ago and express deep regret that it has taken so long to rectify the situation.
So finally, eventually, about 4 or 5 years ago, the British government acknowledged this mistake, this travesty. But what I'm looking at on the screen right now is a true hero, someone who was selfless in how he acted, for working for and doing things for the right reason, not doing them to have his name on a wall or on a grave. And luckily for him, he actually survived the war, but even so, not for that acknowledgement, but yet should have been granted it. So, to me, this is a true hero. And he is only the story that we know. There were hundreds of thousands, millions others, just like him, from all walks of life, from all denominations, from all faiths, from all countries, that are lying buried in unmarked and unknown graves forever. And their families will never have had the opportunity to visit and to have some element of closure. And one of the most important things we do every year on the 11th of November is to acknowledge publicly that every single man who lost his life fighting, defending freedom, allowing us to have the life that we currently have, is worth celebrating, remembering and acknowledging. And as a resident of the UK, I'm delighted the government have done the right thing, but it pains me that it's taken nearly 100 or over 100 years for the acknowledgement for men like Darwan to actually get the credit that he deserved.
Does It Matter? By Siegfried Sassoon.
Does it matter losing your legs? For people will always be kind, and you need not show that you mind when the others come in after hunting to gobble their muffins and eggs. Does it matter losing your sight? There's such splendid work for the blind, and people will always be kind as you sit on the terrace remembering and turning your face to the light. Do they matter, those dreams from the pit? You can drink and forget and be glad, and people won't say that you're mad, for they'll know you've fought for your country, and no one will worry a bit.
All of which brings us on to one final hero I thought it was important that we acknowledged this year, throughout COVID and the 2 years of lockdown that we've had and so on, and that's Captain Tom Moore, who we lost earlier this year. And I think these are two contrasting heroes, clearly from very different backgrounds, very different parts of the world, but their story is equally as important for different reasons, for different positions. But I think it's this celebration of heroism, I think, takes so many different forms. It's important that we acknowledge it in all of its forms. But I think Captain Sir Tom this year is one that we need to acknowledge as it was the year that he passed away.
Lovely story coming up. A 99-year-old war veteran has decided to walk 100 lengths of his back garden. He wants to raise money for the NHS.
Every day I'm doing about 10, what I call a lap of the house. I do 10 each day, so that eventually I'll get 100.
There he goes. A big round of applause. You're an inspiration to us all, and we thank you.
I think I've always looked at it, tomorrow will be a good day.
incredibly important message. You can be and do everything or anything that you want to do or anything that you want to be. A very important message from Captain Tom. Right, boys, that's coming to the end of our liturgy now and our assembly. We will finish this off at 11 o'clock by having our 2-minute silence, but I want to leave you with one really important message that we must take away with us today and remember in the future before we meet again this time next year. When you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow, we gave our today. Thank you, boys.